You mentioned the defence. I'll come back to that. I had Andrew Fletcher on doing, who's, as you know, in the defence area, and talking how that's impacting on our property market. But let me just finish through the budget, and then we get on to a couple more, perhaps more interesting things. Now, in particular, the word no in the bonus grant phases out the new first home owners grant, which has been upped, but then savagely reduced as to who can get it. Talk to me about what the logic is and why people would be happy with that.
Well, the logic is a couple of reasons. One is that there is still a first home owners grant from the Commonwealth, $7,000. That's still there. What we did as state governments, at the request of the Commonwealth government, we increased it for first home buyers, for existing houses and for new construction. We put our own $4,000 on top of it.
That's right.
Now what I've done is I've taken the $4,000 off of the first home owners grant for established, but we've doubled it for new builds. The rationale there is quite simple. One is that we do want to encourage more house construction in South Australia to make sure we keep the dwelling stock at a level that will house South Australians. But equally, economic cycles are such, real estate cycles are such that we don't want to put too much fuel into the fire. Like, we've had quite a bit of drag forward of people with the first home owners grants available. That has pulled forward a number of sales and activity, and we need to ensure that we don't overfuel that element of the housing market. And it's a budget saving. So, you know, there are three reasons, but importantly, we've doubled it for a new build, so you can get $15,000 now if you can find an opportunity that suits you to build a new home.
But is that capped to the $575,000?
That's correct, yes.
So that's house and land?
Yep.
575. So essentially you've boxed it up, so kept the cap on it, reduced who can get, so the established homes now are not being topped up at all?
No, well, they get the $7,000 from the Commonwealth.
From the feds.
And we're putting the cap on that as well.
On that as well?
Yeah. But I mean, with all due respect, you know, a first home buyer, you know, if they can afford to get a house more than $600,000, well, you could argue they don't need a first home owner's grant. Equally, you know, we would assume and would hope that sensible purchasing by first home buyers would be at a market price well under the ceiling.
Kevin, what I don't get is, and you hope to be able to explain it to me, why you have a stamp duty payable on a first home, and then, so on the one hand, you know, the state government takes the money away, and then on the other hand, you know, all these various schemes which must have a lot of administration costs and all the hoo-ha with that. So they've got to go through all those cycles and all that work and all those public servants all working through it to give back a cheque at the other end. Why wouldn't you just have something dead simple that just says there will be no stamp duty on a property up to $575,000 if you're the first home buyer? Full stop.
Well, a couple of reasons. I mean, I think in theory that's a very good point. A couple of things is that we get $7,000 from the Commonwealth for first home buyers, which you'll get regardless. Stamp duties are pretty consistent. First home buyers grants can fluctuate in the size of them. And it looks a bit of a round robin and a bit of unnecessary paperwork, but for from our side of the fence, the simplicity of it works for us. I can accept for the consumer it might look a bit round robin in terms of having to pay stamp duty then get your rebate.
So would you look at that? Had you really thought about it?
Well, we have looked at it, but it's not as easy as it sounds. The way our system works, it is easier for us to levy a stamp duty and then to provide a rebate or a cash return to the home buyer of the amount that they're able to receive back from the government.
Okay. Now, I said we'll come back to defence, which I'd like to in a minute. I'd also like to come back to stamp duties in a minute. But let's finish on the budget. What other positives have come out of this budget for people who are thinking about property? I mean, things like the mining royalty of 5%, is that going to negatively impact on employment and therefore property markets?
Not at all. I mean, the mining companies of Australia are in a very good position. I mean, commodity pricing and demand expectations, particularly from China and India, are such that, it is only fair that we as governments, as taxpayers, get a reasonable share of that income. I've aligned myself to the Liberal Premier in WA, Colin Barnett, where he's pitched it at 5%. So we're not outbidding or undercutting even the state of WA. We're bringing ourselves into line with Western Australia. So I think if miners in WA can live with this regime, they'll have no problem living with it here.
Okay, in terms of just generally the resources that are available for country areas like country hospitals, police stations, you know, will there be more of a rationalisation of that, or are they left pretty much untouched in the budget?
No, left untouched. In fact, with policing in this budget, because it is committing to all of our election promises, 100% committed to, 300 new police. Large proportion of those will go into regional South Australia and country South Australia. We're not hurting regional health or touching country hospitals. In fact, putting more money into it. This year alone, we're putting, you know, a matter of many hundreds of millions of dollars of new expenditure into our health system. You know, and a large proportion of that will flow into country and regional South Australia.
Okay, so those people that are living in these rural areas are not going to expect to suddenly lose, you know, to have shutdowns?
No, but you know, we've also got to acknowledge that in regional South Australia, John Hill, the Minister for Health, and his agency have been doing a lot of good work in improving the quality of our services in what we call our base hospitals. So Whyalla, Port Lincoln, Mount Gambier, in the Riverland, in Berry, you know, where we're building a new hospital, where we have been consolidating high-class services in significant centres in various regions to ensure that the network of smaller hospitals can feed into the larger hospitals, and ultimately if the illness is such that it requires treatment in Adelaide, we're improving the quality of healthcare here in Adelaide.
Okay. Now, a sort of reasonably rapid fire few questions.
Sure.
In the budget, it mentions the first time owners grant will be abolished in South Australia for giving, etc. 8,000 new homes valued at 450. Stamp duty provisions will also be changed to raise an extra 50 million over 3 years, which the Treasurer says will end tax minimisation avenues for landholders. That doesn't sound very good.
Well, that's commercial property. We have what's called a land-rich provision here in stamp duties. It's a question of how the Valuer General and the Tax Commissioner value the land component of a commercial property. And we're talking the larger properties here. We're now moving to a land value model which is consistent with other states. It's in a sense, and I make no criticism of people because you should be able to minimise your tax burden legally, but equally governments reserve the right where it believes that we've left a window open that we can tighten or close that window to ensure equity in the system.
Now, we've had some very active debate on this issue. Isn't that just in essence just putting up the rate?
No, not at all. It's ensuring that property owners who have previously been able to structure their business in a way where they could minimise the amount of stamp duty that is paid on a transaction were effectively being treated in a way different to what other property transactions are being treated, simply because the law enabled them to do that. So we're simply bringing fairness and consistency, so a property owner of a large building will be receiving the same type of treatment as somebody with a smaller property. It's equity and fairness, Anthony. It's a good basis of good public policy when it comes to taxation.